What's going on, guys? It's going to be our summary of markets week 64, and then as always, we're going to get into our options watch list right after that. But let's get started with SPY. So we're sitting right on the targets that I gave you guys. I think it was 2 weeks ago. It wasn't last week's video, but the week before that. We had targets at 411 and 414. Both those targets were hit, and then we're kind of consolidating right on those as support for now. We had a little bit of a nasty sell-off last week due to the bad news from Biden saying that he wanted to raise the capital gains tax on the wealthy. And you basically saw the market pretty much instantly sell off when he announced that. But funny enough, the next day we basically retraced the entire move as if there was no sell pressure there at all. So we actually ended up putting in an all-time high on Friday. We sold off a little bit right after putting in that all-time high, but it was pretty strong buy pressure all the way into that all-time high. So for now, I would say as long as we stay above like 414, this should continue higher into our around 420 and 424 targets, okay? So keep an eye on those levels. There's a little bit of a resistance up here around that previous all-time high where that doji came in. So it could find a little top here and then maybe pull back again. But like I said, as long as it holds 411, it should be okay. If you lose 411, then you want to be looking for the OTS trail around 407. If you lose that, probably go back down to the breakout point around 401 to 400, where there is also a gap that still needs to be filled. Okay. Moving on to gold, we finally, and I don't want to jinx this, but we finally broke out of this bearish channel. We have been in this channel for, let's see, I think I missed it by one candle. Let's see, we've been in this channel for 259 days, almost a year we've been in this channel, okay? And I talked about this, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, towards the bottom here. We talked about how it was putting in a bull div. So it wasn't confirmed yet when we mentioned it, but it was putting in that bull div, and it was also putting in a bottom warning on the Momo. So look at that bottom warning come in, and that actually created the bottom on gold, so it doesn't look too bad here. If we zoom into the daily, we can see we talked about this in Discord and in the summary. You had that textbook bulldog, like absolute textbook. You had the double bottom. You had the legs are really tight 2 candle patterns, like kind of like a tweezer. You put in that curved back, popped up, put in a little consolidation, and then we broke out of it. This is literally textbook bulldog, beautiful pattern on a bottom there. So we broke out of the 50 moving average. We broke out of the channel. And now we're finding a little bit of resistance a little early. You think this resistance would come in around like 1800, but it's actually coming in around like 1790 to 1780. Okay. As long as we stay above the OTS trail and we stay outside of the channel, so I'd say around 1750, this should continue higher. Okay. So very strong bottoming pattern. Maybe a small pullback to retest the channel, retest the support. But for now, I would definitely lean bullish kind of like short to midterm. Obviously, if we look very long term, like weekly, monthly, we still have a long way to go before this looks very bullish. The monthly actually gave you a buy the dip signal damn near at the exact bottom. So if you guys followed that on the OTS trail, you basically bought the bottom there around 1680. So long term, this is still just a pullback, okay? This move here, this little downward channel, if you look at the monthly, is just a bull flag, really. So very long term, you're still bullish, but what I would want to see on the weekly is you want to reclaim like 1850 around that 50-week moving average. Then you would start to push back into the highs around 1920 to 2000. Okay. Moving on to oil here. We had a little bit of a bear flag here, putting in this kind of accumulation pattern. But we had a very beautiful breakout of this accumulation, and then we came back to retest it, and now we're bouncing again. So right now, this looks pretty good. You're losing your short-term momentum, but your long-term momentum is starting to climb. So we're creating a pinch here. The pinch hasn't found a direction just yet, but it looks like it's going to go higher. So typically, when you have a pinch like this happening, where they're kind of conflicting, one's going down, one's going up, typically the trend line is stronger on the Momo because the trend line takes into account more data, right? So if the trend line is pushing higher and the short term is pushing lower and they kind of create that pinch, typically the trend line will win. So this looks like it wants to flip and go higher. So I would wait for confirmation, but this does look pretty bullish for now. Nice little 3-candle morning star reversal as well. So if we start to climb above 64, look for that fake out level again, and then our target would be around 70. Okay. Moving on to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's been selling off for about 2 weeks now. Let's see. Yeah, almost 2 weeks, with really no relief. You had a little bit of a relief here on that liquidation, and then you created a little bit of a liquidation support, but then you retested it and just blew right through it. So this doesn't look too good. Let's go ahead and delete this short-term fib. Let's go back to our long-term fib here. So long-term fib, there is a lot of support around like 45.6 and then 43.5. Okay. So if we do pull back to those levels, let's look at a 4-hour, see if we have any pivots there. Yeah, so we do have a pivot there. So there's a lot of support down here. So if you're looking to buy the dip, I would be paying attention mainly to this range right here. And if we can pull back and hold that range, we should be pushing back towards the 52 to 54,000 area. If we cannot hold that range, it's going to most likely be a very nasty sell-off down into the 35,000 area. If we look at a volume profile here, and let's take it from like where we broke out of this initial consolidation here back at 20,000. So if we take it all the way back from here, let's see if we can find any areas that we want to keep an eye on. So a very important area is right here. Right around 42,000 is a single print. And what a single print means is when price was pushing through that level, you didn't really trade in that area. It just blew through that level. Okay. So let's go ahead and mark that. And we're going to mark it right around 42,250. And that's going to be our single print. Another area that we want to mark is this value area low here. So we have a value area low around 35,000. That's right where I said it most likely will go down to if we lose this level. And then that level that became the gap around 42,250, that is actually kind of the trigger point. So if you were to break this little support and then break the trigger, that would trigger you down into the value area low. Okay? And if we want to be bullish, the biggest level that we need to look at is this level here. That's the POC of this entire distribution. Okay? So let's go ahead and delete this, make it a little cleaner. And I'll mark these out so we don't forget. This would be the POC. This was our single print. And then this was our value area low. So we'll come back and we'll check these next week to see if they were tested. But for right now, we're kind of stuck in like a no man's land. There's really not a whole lot of support here. You could look to buy like 4-hour pivots or like lower time frame pivots, but there's not a whole lot of support. You're kind of buying in the middle of nowhere in a long-term trend. So I would either wait for the reclaim of 56.5 or wait for the support test of around 46 to 42. Anything in between most likely is going to chop you out. Okay. Let's move on to Ethereum. So I gave you guys some short-term fib targets a few weeks back, and they were actually damn near the top on Ethereum. So 24.7 and then 25.50 were the fib targets, the extension targets, right? And that kind of gave us a lot of resistance, and then we topped out, found some buy the dip signals, tried to go for a secondary breakout, and then topped out again. This actually created a swing high failure. That's when you swing through a level, then come back and close below it. So basically this candle here was your confirmation that this trend is basically is dying. It's topping out, right? So Ethereum looks a lot more bullish than Bitcoin does because you're still green on the OTS. You're still holding the trail. You're still finding a lot of buyers when you do dip. But if Bitcoin continues to sell off, it is going to take Ethereum with it. It's very rare for Ethereum to push higher when Bitcoin is selling off. So where I would be bullish on Ethereum is if Bitcoin finally finds a support and then we break this little trend here. So if we break this trend, we get above that previous high around like 2,400, then I would be bullish, okay? But only if Bitcoin is getting out of that knife that it's falling right now. You don't want to knife catch Bitcoin until it hits support, right? So wait for Bitcoin to hit support, then Ethereum should start to find some buyers, then Ethereum should break out and lead the market higher, okay? So keep an eye on Ethereum above like 2,400. Our next targets would be around 2,800. Excuse me. Let's move on to the options watch list. And mainly, let me actually pull up my other layout. I've been mainly using my bot lately, so let's pull this up. We'll close this one. And we'll keep an eye on these charts here for our watch list. So the watch list overall has remained the same. I haven't really removed or added many things, but I have added a few down here towards the bottom. So let's go over these new ones. Make sure my chart is in the right order here. Okay, there we go. So Katos, I'm still keeping an eye on. The problem with Katos is you had a daily sell signal on the bot. You're also in a 4-hour sell as well. So a little bit of weakness coming in on the higher time frames. You're trying to bounce locally on the 1 hour. But if we zoom in here, this is not a very good reversal because we didn't really gain any value when we pushed out into this little bulldog head here. We wanted to really break out of this bulldog bullishly and then retest the area that kind of created that gap, right? Around like 32 to 33. We weren't able to do that. So until Katos reclaims like 28.70 to 29, I wouldn't be looking for any trades on this. But if it does reclaim that area, there's still a very easy trade up into that gap. Okay, so keep an eye on that. Moving on to NEO. NEO looks really good. We have a daily buy signal coming in. We had a 4-hour buy signal come in a little earlier, and then a 1-hour buy came in down towards the bottom. So every time frame that I like to look at is in a buy signal. And what I like about this buy signal is one of the things I tell you guys to look at for the bot is look at the local trend, right? And if the buy signal is coming in when it breaks the local trend, it is usually a very high strike rate buy signal, right? So take this buy signal, for example. If we were to look at this trend, like if we take these highs, this buy signal did not break that trend. So that would have been a weaker buy. But then this buy signal here is breaking the local trend. So this buy is a lot stronger. Now, the one thing I'd be worried about is you do have earnings coming up on NEO. So I don't think it's next week. Let me see. The 29th. Is that next week? That's Thursday. So if TradingView is correct, their earnings are Thursday. So if you were going to play it, I probably would only be playing Friday lottos. So you'd be taking like maybe a 30 delta, whatever the 30 delta is on Friday. I'm assuming it'd probably be somewhere around like 45-ish. And you could play for a run up into earnings, or you could hold it through earnings. I don't recommend that, obviously. Earnings is a gamble. But without earnings, this is a very bullish chart. Okay. So if their earnings are even slightly good, this should go higher very easily. So keep an eye on that. Another one that I'm watching here is Snapchat. Let's make that so we can see it. They had earnings and they didn't really like the earnings. They sold off a little bit, but they quickly retraced on Friday. So maybe the buyers don't really care about the earnings. And if they start to break like 64.50, 65, this should go higher. This is a near textbook inverse head and shoulders. So as long as you don't put in a new low, as long as you hold that support around 57, this should easily go higher. Okay. So break 65, that would lead you into a target of around 69, and then you could go for an all-time high around 74. So if you wanted to trade like a weekly lotto on that, if it broke 65, you would be looking for around 69. As you guys know, I'm still watching CVS. I really like this move on CVS. Daily buy signals coming in on most major time frames. It's just constantly putting in higher lows. You can see this trend right here. It's almost like a rising wedge, which would be slightly bearish. But if you look at it more like this, it looks a lot more bullish because it could be kind of like an ascending triangle or somewhat of a cup and handle. But basically, it looks very bullish. The problem is you have earnings coming up. So I believe they're not next week, but the week after. And if their earnings are bad, it's not going to break this massively long-term resistance. Okay. But with that said, if their earnings are good, they are at like an apex point. And their earnings could be the factor that pushes them out of this massive range that we've been in for like 4 years. Okay. So if they have good earnings, this could quickly start to climb towards like 80 to 82. Overall, our long-term target, like years out, would be around 100. All right, moving on to McDonald's. I like McDonald's here. You broke out of a resistance level. You can see the bot has been long for a very long time, since March 11th. You've taken a lot of profit on these resistance levels, but you're just continuing to break through these levels. So McDonald's is very strong here, and I think as long as you hold this trend, which would be easier to see on like a lower time frame, as long as you hold that trend, I think McDonald's goes higher. Okay, so maybe a pullback to the trend, but if it holds, keep an eye on around like 238. American Eagle, another one that just doesn't stop running. This thing just goes straight up. Weirdly enough, you've been in a buy since April 5th. It has not taken profit a single time. So what does that tell you? There's not a lot of resistance coming in. This thing is just blowing through these levels without putting in any resistance. Okay, so American Eagle is very, very strong here. Obviously, it's very extended, so you wouldn't really be taking swing trades up here. But if you were looking for some like day trade scalps or maybe even a very short like lotto swing trade, as long as you hold this uptrend that it's been in for quite some time, it should continue higher. So same thing here like McDonald's. If it pulls back to the uptrend, watch for it to hold. If it does hold, very likely going back towards like $40. Moving on to Snow. I still like Snow. Their options are very bad, but if you're playing shares, if Snow breaks this resistance here, this should easily pop to the like 260 to 270 area. So keep an eye on that. No trade unless you break like 244. DoorDash, I still really like here. It had a bull flag come in. It got a little scary there. There was really no buyers stepping in, but then buyers stepped in on Friday. Okay, so as long as you stay above this resistance level, which we closed above around 151, this should go higher. Overall target around 162. And I'll mark that out on the chart here. It's a pivot. I don't currently have the pivots on, but I'll mark it out there. Johnson & Johnson, another one that I like. Their vaccine got unhalted by the FDA, I believe. So that should be fairly good news. If it starts to break these resistance levels around like 168, you should be going back into the highs around 172 to 174. Seaworld, this was one that we called out in Discord, but the problem was it's untradeable with options. Their options are literally untradeable. There's no liquidity. You can't do it. But if you took shares, beautiful trade. You had a break of 52, and then we're popping into like 58. So if it pulls back to that breakout point, this could go for a second run. If it doesn't pull back, I probably wouldn't chase this. PLTR, it's trying to find some support here off that 21 level. You would have to break this trend for me to be interested. It looks like it's going to put in a daily buy signal pretty soon on the bot. But like I told you guys earlier, you want to see a trend break for those buy signals to be very strong, like how these buys here were basically in a downtrend. So if it breaks the trend and puts in a buy, then that will very likely push to around 28 to 30. But until it does that, I wouldn't be trading it. Let's go back to this other chart here for my tech levels. I have all my levels on the tech charts on this one here. So Microsoft looking very good. All of our lower targets have been smashed. Our upper targets remain 262 and 264. If you break those levels, very likely going to 270. You have to stay above 257. For Apple, hold above 133. You could get to 137, 139. If you want a lotto, if it breaks 135, look for 137. Facebook, pulling back to retest support. I think this is a bullish pullback as long as you hold here. Has to hold above 300. If it holds above 300, look for 310. Netflix, nasty gap down on earnings. But what do I always tell you guys? Netflix fills every single gap. Okay? So Netflix putting in this massive gap above you is just giving you a very juicy trade. Now, the only problem with that is when is it going to fill the gap, right? So there's two ways to play this. You can buy shares, and if it goes down, who cares? It's Netflix. They're not going anywhere. You hold on to the shares. You add on to them if you want. You hold on to them and don't add if you want. It doesn't matter, right? Netflix is a very good company. It's not going to go anywhere. It's a very good long-term hold. So eventually, they will fill that gap. It's just a matter of time. So very limited risk there. That's kind of the buy and hold strategy. The other strategy would be to buy some options contracts, maybe I'd say farther than 60 days. Buy some options contracts farther than 60 days. If it starts to go lower, maybe we break like 500, you can sell contracts against the ones that you bought while you're still holding them. You're just selling contracts against them to limit your risk, right? You can kind of turn it into a debit spread. You can turn it into a diagonal. There's many ways you could do that. So short term, you would limit your risk while still holding those contracts. I would probably buy around 550 or like 545, somewhere around that area, the upper gap. And then you just sell against them to protect them if it goes lower. Okay, a lot riskier than just buying shares and holding on. But if it does fill the gap a lot sooner than, say, 60 days, you're going to get paid out on those contracts. Okay. Amazon looks pretty good here. You have to hold above 33.40. It basically hit all of our targets. We had a target around 3446, pretty much hit it, and then topped out. But if we do hold back above this previous level here, we could hit that target fully and then push higher. Keep an eye on that. The problem is with almost every company that I've named so far, plus Tesla, they all have earnings in the next like 2 weeks. Okay, so take everything that I've said so far and understand that you don't want to be playing earnings. So if you're looking at these levels that I'm giving you, excuse me, you want to understand that you most likely do not want to hold those contracts into earnings unless maybe, let's say you take one of those trades, you're up like 50 to 100%, you're making a lot of money, and then earnings comes up in a day or two. What you could do is you could sell contracts against those contracts that you have, kind of like I was talking about with Netflix, turn those into a spread for earnings. So when you sell on top of them, you've already collected most of your profit, right? Let's just say, for example, you buy a contract for $3 and then it goes to $6. So you're up 100%. It's up $300 a contract. You can sell contracts above that contract for, let's say, $5, right? Or $4, whatever it is. You collect the bulk of your profit plus a lot of your principal, and then you let the rest of it run for earnings. That's very risky, though. I typically just don't play earnings, all right? But just understand that if you hold stuff in earnings, your gains could be wiped out very quickly. All right, let's wrap this up with Tesla. Tesla looks pretty good. If you hold 7-Eleven, you could very easily get 769 for the second time. You've already hit that target, but you could get that target again. If you hit 769 and break through it, look for 825. There's a VWAP up there, okay? If you break below 7-Eleven, maybe because of bad earnings, very likely going down to around 666. There's a daily pivot, and then back down to the VWAP around 650, okay? But all right, guys, that's the summary of markets. Hopefully that helped you guys out. If you guys like the video, make sure to like the video. For you guys in Discord, be on the lookout. I am going to be releasing another video going over the bot a little later today. But all right, guys, I'll see you guys tomorrow for our live trading session. You guys have a good one. Peace.